Hello and welcome back to The Next Big Thing. My name is Chris Gennady, Global Head of Research at Wisdom Tree, and today I am joined again by our frequent guest, Mobeen, a director within our European research team, somebody that is following thematic topics and doing thematic meetings across all of Europe. As the days and weeks go by, it's remarkable to consider that as we do this recording, we're already in the second quarter of 2024. The first quarter, if you blinked, you probably missed it. It's over, it's done with, and now we have to move forward. Before we begin, I do need to state the following. To clarify, the views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of Wisdom Tree and Mobeen and are subject to change. Anything we present in this podcast is not intended to be relied on as a forecast, research, nor as investment or tax advice. The informations and opinions expressed in this podcast are not a recommendation, offer, or solicitation to buy or sell any securities, and reliance upon them is at the sole discretion of the listener. Please remember, past performance is no indication of future results. And so, with that said, Mobeen, what have, as you've gone across Europe, multiple different events, multiple different sales calls, when you're thinking about the interest from the investors in thematics, what are some of the highlights that you've seen in your recent travels?
Chris, one interesting evolution in the conversation I've had, particularly on AI, and I say AI because it's been a hot topic in the last year or so, and remains so as we do this recording now. One interesting evolution in that conversation is that last year, when you spoke to people whether it was investors at investment conferences or it was your friends around the dinner table, everyone was talking about, hey, have you looked at this cool new tool, whether it was chat gpt or something else that they would have heard about. And and the conversation went something like, look at this functionality. It can write an essay for you, it can write a story, it can write a poem. Have you checked it out? Some people might have said yes, some people might have said no, this looks really cool, I should take a look. Whereas now, if you talk to the same people, it seems like the conversation is at a stage where people are saying, I've actually tried such and such tools and implemented such and such tools in my personal life or in my workflow. I like such tools, and I don't like these other tools. And so the conversation seems to have gone from being impressed by this cool new technology to actual practical implementation, which is a very exciting phase shift, if you ask me, because that is exactly what we stated in our outlook, which we published recently at Wisdom Tree. We said that 2023 was all about AI touching the masses, everyone getting excited, and of course businesses wanted to get on board. But 2024 might be a year when everyone starts to see the practical use cases of this sort of technology, and this is a very exciting new phase to enter in, particularly for investors, because it means that uh, we'll start to see tangible results for investments. We'll start to see, perhaps more winners and losers, new entrants, use cases, all sorts of exciting things. So very very cool new phase to enter into. But that's the way I've experienced the conversations with investors. I'm curious if you felt something similar over the last year or so.
Yeah, it's we have seen an evolution. You think back a year ago. So as we're doing this recording, it's early April of 2024. So in early April of 2023, GPT-4, or what we think of as GPT-4, was really just being released. So it's sort of weird to think that one of the most widely discussed and often cited large language models in today's world has only been around for a little bit more than a year. And the reason it's important to think of that one in particular is Microsoft, which flirts with being either the biggest company in the world or the second biggest on the basis of market cap, depending on how share prices are moving day to day and week to week, when they report their earnings, among the most important things that comes out is the influence of artificial intelligence in increasing that year over year growth figure in their cloud business, often referred to as Azure, often referred to as intelligent cloud, depending on where you're looking in their financial statements. But the exciting thing that they're able to put forward is for a company that has a market capitalization in the 3 trillion, that's trillion with a T range, they've got a component of their revenues growing at roughly 30% per year. And in the most recent earnings that they've reported, which was for the end of 2023, they were saying 6% of that 30% was coming from essentially those that were signing up to use Azure and to integrate GPT-4 capabilities within Azure. So the nice thing that cloud providers do is they say if you store all of your data with us, and you're paying obviously on an ongoing basis to do that, if you pay incrementally a bit more here and a bit more there, you can take advantage of all these modules and features that we have. And that was one of the things that sort of underpinned the decision. It was a very fast and strategic decision not that long ago. Again, the idea that Microsoft makes a significant investment in OpenAI, and they're able to offer OpenAI's capabilities across a lot of different aspects of what they bring to their software subscribers. And I purposely say subscribers because I think that's how you have to think of a Microsoft customer today. You're subscribing, and depending on the buttons and the boxes that you tick, another important box that we hope, and we cross our fingers here on the screen to get more information on, is Microsoft Copilot, where it's this nifty feature which is sort of ensconced now across the Office 365 suite. And to get access to that, it's $30 per user per month, per the most recent pricing. It's only been available to the general public and general corporate users since November of last year. And when Microsoft reported its most recent earnings, you didn't get, a good sense of daily active users or uptake with regard to that specific software feature. But if it's now April, so the March quarter is over, and in the coming weeks, if Microsoft does put more clarity and more detail around the Copilot subscriptions and users, this is exciting. And the main reason, what I'll close with on this initial question, the main reason that this is exciting is if you look at Microsoft's financial statements for, say, the last 4 years, you'll see more than 100 billion with a B, of capital expenditure. That's a lot of money for any company. True, Microsoft's market cap is 3 trillion, but spending 100 billion on anything is a remarkably strong investment. And the main question that we feel needs to start getting answered, and I guess the beginning of this journey is 2024, and then we'll see 2025 and beyond, is what are we getting as investors for that expenditure? Anytime a company makes a capital expenditure, what's the return on investment? And Microsoft's not the only one. Meta has made various statements about their investments. Alphabet's making investments. Amazon's making investments. All these companies are making huge investments. True, they're some of the biggest companies in the world. Many were known last year as Magnificent Seven. Maybe that title is fading off into the ether as we're in April of 2024 now. But you step back and you say hundreds of billions are being spent. They're continuing to be spent. A lot of that goes to the NVIDIA chips, but it's also on other things. New data centers are being built. What is it that these things are going to be used for, and what's the adoption of those new software services? And the more clarity we get on those points, we think the better and the more comfortable we're going to feel as investors in AI.
Yeah, absolutely. And Chris, you mentioned NVIDIA there. I think any conversation around AI has to have a discussion on the latest from NVIDIA. I was fascinated by NVIDIA making the announcement following its GTC conference that happened in March. And of course, if we don't mention the GTC conference from NVIDIA in March, we might be doing our audience a disservice here. But quoting NVIDIA and their statement on their new Blackwell platform, it was fascinating to read about some of the numbers that they have highlighted in terms of the improvement in performance that you can get from this new chip platform, the GB200 NVL72, to quote the precise model as quoted on their website. And they compared it to their existing H100 GPUs, and the claim is that it can give a 30x performance increase compared to the existing H100 and reduce cost and energy consumption by up to 25x. Now, those were incredible numbers given that they were comparing the new chip platform to the to the market leader, the incumbent market leader, which already is something that everyone is trying to get their hands on and which is already being offered by Nvidia anyway. So the key takeaway for me was, even as we talk about all the waves that Nvidia is making and all the gain in its market capitalization, it still continues to excite the masses and markets and investors alike with its innovation. It's still staying ahead of the curve, and it's doing some very exciting things. But the second takeaway for me from this is, uh, now NVIDIA has, of course, become a household name. And uh, yes, it was still a big company maybe 2, 3, 4 years ago. People recognize the name. If you were in the computer industry, if you were into gaming, you recognize that NVIDIA has an important role there. But now everyone knows NVIDIA. But what people don't know is what will be the next Nvidia, and that's the question that investors love to talk about these days. Where will the next big story come from? And um, we talk about big players in the AI space. Maybe the next big player is a familiar name. Maybe it's a name that no one knows about at all, and that's a very interesting discussion to me. So curious to get your thoughts on that as well, in terms of uh, who might be the next big player in the AI space. And when investors ask you that question, we get that question a lot, certainly in terms of building a pure exposure to the AI space. How do you tackle that question?
That's one of the biggest questions out there. And so, if companies today are trying to compare themselves to NVIDIA, in our opinion, you're basically, whether you're a basketball player trying to compare yourself to LeBron James, Kobe Bryant, or Michael Jordan. I mean, there are certain comparisons that are just always going to be very difficult. NVIDIA, the amazing thing, stepping back sort of through history, is you think about the company and you say they start out, they're making graphics chips for video games and computer graphics. Then they're able to sort of shift. And in that presentation at GTC, Jensen Huang, the CEO and founder, noted first contact in 2012 when what's known as the AlexNet moment, where there were researchers, including Jeff Hinton up in Canada, basically saying if I use GPUs to better recognize and process the ImageNet database, I might see an improvement in performance. And it wasn't just a small improvement in 2012, it was sort of a step change improvement, which sort of set us onto the current path where we find ourselves with AI and deep learning and putting NVIDIA at the forefront. And in that time between 2012 and today, NVIDIA also found itself as a central player, being able to offer chips that would help in cryptocurrency mining. And so NVIDIA has been able to position itself at the forefront of numerous different megatrends. When we at Wisdom Tree do our thematic universe and we look at different theme-based equity ETFs across the board, it's possible that NVIDIA might be the most owned across different themes where you think of the metaverse and there could be a case for NVIDIA. You think of cryptocurrency mining and the blockchain, there could be a case for NVIDIA. There's obviously a case in AI, there's a case in semiconductors. And so NVIDIA has done an incredible job. And something that comes up a lot is, are we in a bubble? Where they're basically saying the performance of NVIDIA has been so good. I think a year ago we were still talking about a stock which might have been closer to 500 billion in market cap. Today we're close to 2 trillion. So to add 1.5 trillion of market cap in roughly a year, that's something that we've basically never seen a precedent for. So maybe in the future that becomes a more normalized thing that you see across different companies. But as of now in 2024, that is a historic thing to see. And you think about that and you say, does that mean that the valuation, and people tend to think of the tech bubble and they think of the late 90s going into 2000, where we know the history there. The 1990s for tech stocks were unbelievable. And then the 2000s were terrible because you start off at bubble high valuations. Now, frequently when we're asked this question, we remind people that in 2000, one of the things you would do to increase your valuation was to just add .com to the name of the company. So a lot of pets.com was sort of the quintessential example, but a lot of companies at that point, you would see a .com right in the name of the company. And stocks were trading based on adding .com to the name. 4 characters in the title that you would see, that was enough. You were also making up new statistics, things like clicks and views and eyeballs, and these things. I mean, today they're better understood in the context of search engine optimization. We know a lot more today about how to value daily active, monthly active users, and things of that sort than we did then. But at that point, there were statements that things like earnings and revenues, you don't need to worry about those anymore. And in today's world, what NVIDIA has done is they've sort of set a template of, look, adding an incredible amount of market capitalization, delivering hundreds of incremental percentage points of share price return and appreciation. That's well and good, but the fundamentals are also delivering absolutely incredible growth. And so what we've been intrigued by, and one of the things we predicted, was companies connected to NVIDIA supplying, recognizing when Jensen Huang is on the stage and he's showing the GPUs that are being used within the system that Mobeen detailed a bit about. It's not just there's a simple one chip and that there you have it. There's high bandwidth memory. There's all sorts of other things. I mean, at Wisdom Tree, one of the areas that we focus a lot on are commodities. And I've even seen a discussion of copper demand going up because you think of some of these cables where, if it's absolutely the case that Mark Zuckerberg and Meta are to be believed, and these companies are not just buying a few of these types of systems. On the H100 side, which is the previous model, not the Blackwell model, it was stated that a few 100,000 units were going to be purchased. Billions of dollars were going to be spent on these systems. And you think of how much copper is going into the servers, and that's just one of the many different raw materials. That is something that we have seen interest in. We've seen articles written. We've seen thoughts. And what was notable is Micron, which is a company that does memory chips, after the GTC event, reported some data. It had a terrible year. So if you look at Micron's returns last year, and we have it in some of our Wisdom Tree strategies, so we were looking with bated breath and coming off of a terrible time in the memory chip cycle. You saw an incredible incremental boost in returns because there was a recognition that SK Hynix, yes, is the probably biggest provider of these high bandwidth memory chips, but Micron is right there, and probably right behind Micron is going to soon come Samsung. And so you have these tangential or ancillary players within the AI ecosystem that benefit from being touched by NVIDIA or supplying very, very necessary additional inputs and additional equipment, without which these chips that NVIDIA is making really cannot run. And so it's been exciting to see that you of course have NVIDIA that everybody looks at, and probably 9 out of every 10 articles are written with some mention of NVIDIA. But to see other companies coming to the fore to us is incredibly exciting.
For sure. And so another important observation, Chris, on the thematic landscape. You asked what are people talking about and asking us about. People are certainly asking about the threat of more sophisticated cyber attacks, thanks to uh, AI and generative AI. Of course, Jensen Huang, the NVIDIA CEO, he also recently said that fewer people now need to learn to program because you have generative AI doing the programming for you. But unfortunately, if generative AI goes into the wrong hands, that can create more malicious actors as well, and perhaps the bar for becoming a malicious actor, if you've got bad intentions, has been lowered thanks to these tools. So we do hear investors asking us about, what are the implications on cybersecurity. I was intrigued. One of the recent reports from the World Economic Forum. They surveyed 120 executives. It was their 2024 cybersecurity outlook, and one of the questions in this report was that in the next 2 years, will generative AI provide an overall advantage to attackers or to defenders? And interestingly, 120 executives who answered this question, 56% said that the advantage goes to attackers, 35% were sort of neutral or balanced, and only 9% said that the advantage goes to defenders. Now, the report further detailed what were people actually worried about, and they were worried about more sophisticated phishing attacks. They were worried about more sophisticated development of malware. Deep fakes was mentioned. Now, of course, you might think that this is a worrying result from the survey, that more people think that the advantage is going to attackers. But equally, you might take comfort in saying that at least executives are recognizing the risk to organizations from more sophisticated cyber attacks, and perhaps they will start to do something about it as well, and maybe the cybersecurity spend in organizations increases, and the tools become more sophisticated, and start employing AI as well. So uh, no surprises that cybersecurity was one of the hottest themes in 2023, and perhaps will remain so, one of those linked themes to the AI story in our view. Your thoughts on that, Chris?
It's an interesting one in the sense that I wish that the shares would actually trade based on how people feel about cybersecurity, because it's in a way almost like a utility, in the sense that when we get up in the morning, we know we need a certain amount of water to do business in the modern world and record something like a podcast like we're doing right now. We need electricity. We need certain kinds of semiconductors as we, turn on our TVs or computers, cell phones, all sorts of different equipment. So there are things in the modern world that are just needed. And cybersecurity and being knowledgeable about cybersecurity has in a way become one of those things. Because if somebody were to say, I'm unfamiliar with cybersecurity, or if you were to hear about a business with no cybersecurity strategy, they're not going to be around for very long. I mean, it's just something that is a necessity. It's not an option. Of course, what you don't know is which companies are going to provide the best option, the best service for cybersecurity. So you don't know what companies are going to do, but for the most part, the smart companies of today are going to do something. It's entered the just general consciousness. There is an expression that you hear when you're delving into the cybersecurity space. The attackers only need to be right once. The defenders need to be right 100% of the time. And so the surface level analysis of that statement would seem to indicate, okay, the attackers always have the advantage because the attackers are sort of sitting there from a position of they can do a million attacks, and if one out of a million goes well, then they've done the job. Whereas the defender in that case has failed because essentially an attack got through. Now, it's still the case, and frequently people see various television shows and whatnot, and you're getting the more realistic television shows. What you see is the cyber tools that exist, and generative AI and phishing can certainly be one. Fooling people is your more if you're a criminal actor, that is your more profitable way to go. Trying to fool a machine or hack through an advanced firewall and things of that nature, that is actually not your high probability path to success. And so cybersecurity in a way is very similar to the concept of, say, deepfakes, which are proliferating, and you're seeing more and more articles as we're coming into, at least in the US market, elections. And the difficulty of delineating what is a deepfake video versus what is a real video. This is a real concern. To my knowledge, as we record this podcast, there is no one size fits all, fail safe, 100% certain way to look at a video and to be able to know, okay, this is 100% real or this is 100% fake. So you do have to have that grain of salt mentality these days of, okay, if I'm a person, anything I look at online, there can be fakes. And there are articles written about different stories where employees sign into a Teams or a Zoom or whatever type of system. They think they're talking to their colleagues. They're not. And money has been sent, in some cases, large amounts, more than $1 million, has been sent and authorized based on people who thought they were meeting with their colleagues and were actually meeting with deepfake animations of their colleagues that they were ultimately fooled by. And so using these tools to fool people is still going to be one of the high, if you're again a criminal actor, that's going to be your highest probability of success. And if you're a defender, continuing Mobeen, what I liked is the fact that you have a certain communication, a certain awareness proliferating, where yes, it's important to spend the money and make the investment, but I know at Wisdom Tree we do our cybersecurity training, and just having employees and just general citizens aware that what they see online, you can never always think it's 100% true and it's 100% accurate. There can always be tricks of the trade thrown out there as you approach these decisions.
One of my someone I know recently reached out to me, Chris, and they wanted my opinion. Being someone from the investment industry, they wanted my investment opinion on a new investment opportunity that they had seen online somewhere, where they had seen a video of Elon Musk endorsing a new AI slash quantum computing investment opportunity. Without knowing the exact details, they said, can you take a look at this? And they shared a certain name, which once I explored a little bit further, turned out to be completely fake. Now, the reason why I mentioned this was the person who actually asked me, his role within his organization was related to information security. So the point being that this was a very smart person who understands the risks that are involved, but still humans are entirely are we can fall for these things, especially because these things are becoming more and more convincing. The deep fakes are becoming better and better as the technology improves. And the whole social media experiment is a new one. We're not, even as things stand, the the instinct to scrutinize and question everything online is just not there yet. We haven't developed those instincts yet, and now we're being bombarded with deep fakes, which we just don't know how to deal with. So this is where automated systems and technology has to come in to assist us to identify and and hopefully filter out some of those deep fakes from our consumption. And that's where I think the role of cybersecurity companies will become increasingly important. And like you said, this is something that should continue to happen in the background, so that you almost never hear about it as long as everything's working.
And look, an important thing to have in mind, because investors might be, listening to Mobeen and my excitement about cybersecurity, and then they might pull up various investment strategies and look at some of the recent performance figures, which, as a spoiler alert here, have not been great. March was a tricky month for growth-oriented thematic strategies, and so there is a pattern of trading when you see what types of things have been associated recently with the strongest share price performance in some of these themes. And it's still the case that you look and you say, from October to about January, October of 2023 to about January, performance was very strong across many themes, cybersecurity included. And what was happening at that point was, yes, the theme itself was important and AI was important, and all of those developments were ongoing. But there was also in the background the US Federal Reserve and various expectations of lower interest rates in 2024. And as you sort of have seen 2024 evolve, and this sort of relates to Wisdom Tree's outlook in many ways, it's still the case that it's widely expected by many market participants, not just Wisdom Tree, that there are going to be some cuts in the Fed funds policy rate during 2024, but it's already been pushed back in the sense that it's clear that the Fed is not rushing to do this. And in general, when we think of some of these stocks where they may not necessarily yet have positive earnings, uh, the performance gets a bit of a boost when interest rates are going down, and the performance runs a bit into the wind, has to get over a bit of a hurdle when interest rates and expectations of interest rates are more stable or going up. And so we'll have to continue to just see how important is the excitement of the topic, which Mobeen and I have covered, and how important is it to be thinking in the background of sort of the more macro backdrop, which is always there. And the unfortunate thing is we can't say it's always the case that interest rates are equally as important. We know they're always a factor. They're always there. But after the sort of hikes that we saw, which were some of the fastest hikes that we've seen going back for almost 50 years, you're now going into this zone of people are debating, is inflation more under control? And as a result of inflation being more under control, when are you going to see the central banks take action in that direction? And how is it ultimately going to affect many of these stocks, many of which are US listed stocks? So you tend to start with a discussion of the US Fed, but then, of course, the ECB and other central banks are also important there.
Yeah, and it's never going to be growth of any given theme is never going to be in a straight line, right? Even if we make the case that cybersecurity is a theme that's here to stay, AI is going to be an enduring theme. That doesn't mean that the stock market performance is just going to be a linear upward straight line. And naturally, these other variables are at play. The macroeconomic backdrop is at play, and different themes have been affected differently. and one of the themes that we mentioned as an example in our outlook, and we keep referring to our outlook. This is Wisdom Tree's thematic outlook, which is available on Wisdom Tree's website for anyone interested in reading. One of the themes that we mentioned as a potential contrarian idea, we say contrarian because it's one of the themes that has been affected perhaps more so by the rising rate environment and the macroeconomic environment, is the biotechnology sector. And in recent times, we've seen that the biotech sector has not necessarily been able to perform in line with some of the strong performance in AI and cybersecurity that Chris just alluded to in recent months. But it's a space that is perhaps underappreciated, and the potential impact of AI is underappreciated there. One thing that we noted in our analysis was in the biotech space, there are a lot of AI focused biotech companies emerging, and one of the biggest areas of AI focused biotech companies is in drug discovery. In terms of number of biotech companies that are focusing on AI. So drug discovery is a very hot topic where AI can have a major impact. But biotech is an interesting sector because it's a sort of sector where markets get very excited when there's a big breakthrough, but when there isn't something, when there aren't those major breakthroughs being announced, perhaps those macroeconomic headwinds play a bigger role, as has been the case in the last couple of years or so. But AI creates that potential for more breakthroughs and more frequent breakthroughs if we are able to shorten the time that it takes to discover a new drug, if we are able to improve the odds of picking the winners using AI tools. That means that potentially in the years to come, we might see more big announcements coming from the biotech space, and that might get markets excited and possibly lift up the fortunes of biotech companies. So that was a contrarian idea that we pitched in the outlook. But I know, Chris, you've been engaging with this topic quite deeply for some time. Your thoughts on AI's impact on biotechnology, and when might we start to see that upside starting to happen?
There have been it's nice to bring it up, Mobeen, because there have been some green shoots of positive activity where you'll hear some M&A activity sort of on the border. You'll hear some private companies getting some funding in 2024. And so based on the fact that people are covering the space, you're seeing articles, you're seeing interest, it's clear that there are some contingents of the investment world which are hoping and rooting for the space after numerous years of largely lowering valuations and share price underperformance for those companies that are in the public market. Now, there are two things to sort of have in mind, in my opinion, that might help just contextualize, because one of the things about our now social media world that Mobeen referenced in a cybersecurity context, but in sort of a software company context, and you see the common thread that sort of flits through most of the Magnificent Seven is these are platform companies where you think of the reason why the companies that are multiple trillions in market capitalization have attained those heights is frequently when you look under the hood, you see some sort of a usually software oriented platform where when these companies are trying to add incremental value to their user base, in the case of say a Meta, which is running the Facebook platform and the Instagram platform and the WhatsApp platform, if it is adding a feature to any of those platforms, it's billions of people, billions with a B. And there's only 8 billion people on the whole planet, and so if one company is able to serve billions of people, plural, That is something incredible to consider. And many of the other, if Apple does something where it's widely anticipated, there's going to be AI capability going into the phone. That's billions of people. That's an important platform. And similarly, if Google with its Android platform does something similar, that's billions of people. And so there are these gigantic platforms where you have your ChatGPT example, where within a month's time there's 100 million daily active users, roughly speaking. And you think of the biotech side of the ledger, where we were incredibly excited to see the sickle cell therapy approved in late 2023. But if you step back and you say, okay, CRISPR, the topic, which is sort of the underpinning science that led to that therapy, that's a 2012 uh, discovery. Then the Nobel Prize being awarded is, say, a 2019 or a 2020, and the approval of one therapy to treat one very important disease is years after that. So all in, you're talking 10 years, maybe a little bit more. And in today's world, 10 years is an eternity. Um, Many people don't, we think they should have investment horizons 10 years or longer, but many people are investing and thinking of the next few months. And everyone's situation is different, and it's not for us to say what's right or wrong. But when you're thinking of biotechnology, having an appropriate timeline, recognizing that Mobeen and I are saying, okay, AI might shorten some of these discovery times. Shortening doesn't mean it goes from 10 years to a few months. Shortening might mean it goes from 10 years to 8 years, which is a big gain, very important. But 8 years, again, is still a much longer time frame than what we're accustomed to. The other thing to have in mind, and this is important to think about as we get into election season in the US and see, are we going to see a different administration or a continuation of the same administration, is merger and acquisition activity. Frequently in biotech, a company comes up with a new scientific approach, process, and the win for them is that company is acquired by a bigger company. In today's world, now it's been concentrated a bit more towards tech. Companies like Apple, Amazon, sometimes Microsoft. You've seen M&A activity very, very highly scrutinized. NVIDIA, if you recall, was not able to purchase ARM a few years back, and so certain M&A activities have been actually rejected by various government authorities. Sometimes those are in the U.S., sometimes those are outside the U.S., sometimes it's across the board, just all of them in general. And so if M&A activity is not able to progress or able to function as it has in the past, especially with some of the larger companies, which for the biggest therapeutic advancements, this is quite important. It's going to be harder to see those exit opportunities and to see the valuation unlocks in biotechnology. So again, we'll see if a different administration in the U.S. might create a different tune on that topic, or might be more of the same. But the M&A environment has not been as friendly as maybe it was in years past, and that could also have an influence as we seek to unlock valuations in biotechnology.
Another thing, Chris, that investors are still keeping an eye on. Of course, when we're talking about thematic investing, um, you can observe some of the hot topics, but then you keep an eye on some of the things that haven't been doing well, but there might be good potential. And anything to do with the energy transition lately has been struggling. But we still at Wisdom Tree get questions from our investors because they're keeping an eye on the undercurrents that can potentially lift this theme again. So we did offer this as another contrarian idea in our outlook. Uh, and we recognize that of course 2023 was hard. There were supply chain issues, there were conflicts, there were rising rates, inflation. All of these things were headwinds for the energy transition. But having said that, and I'll quote a number from our energy transition partners, Wood Mackenzie, the consulting firm. They noted that in 2023 there was 1.7 trillion USD invested in clean energy, and this number was 65% higher than fossil fuels. So this is a very profound statistic in my view, and if you complement that with the International Energy Agency's numbers, and I'll quote some numbers from the latest report from the International Energy Agency. There was an 85% increase in solar capacity worldwide, 60% increase in wind power in 2023 compared to 2022, 35% increase in electric vehicle sales, and 360% increase in electrolyzers. I know, Chris, in one of the previous podcast episodes, you and I, we spoke about hydrogen as a potential uh, energy transition related theme, which could come up, but it's perhaps not as hyped up right now. But still, 360% increase in electrolyzers installations worldwide last year. Now, electrolyzer is, quite simply for our audience, the machine with which you can produce green hydrogen. So you can conduct the electrolysis of water, separate the hydrogen from the oxygen using a renewable energy current. And there you have it. You have clean hydrogen, which you call green hydrogen, rather than hydrogen being produced from fossil fuels. So a profound increase in electrolyzer installations worldwide, alongside solar and wind. And all of this, of course, uh, in 2024 is perhaps going to go even further now that policymakers have pledged to triple renewable energy capacity at the COP28 by 2030. So the point being that uh, if you look at stock market performance for green energy stocks, they paint a very different story. They don't necessarily paint the story that some of these statistics are painting, but this is bound to turn. If you ask us at Wisdom Tree, we think that you can't have this sort of unprecedented growth in a sector and markets just completely ignoring it forever. Whether the market turns in the next month, 6 months, or a year, who knows? But eventually, once perhaps the macroeconomic headwinds start to dissipate, maybe once the Fed moves and starts to cut its rates, maybe that is the point that some of the clean energy stocks turn. But indeed, the undercurrents are strong enough that they will make their presence felt once the macroeconomic headwinds subside. And that will be a very exciting time for investors. But some investors who are looking at this with a bit of foresight are perhaps asking those questions right now, which we are very happy to discuss with our clients.
One of the notable things that I saw fairly recently was Microsoft making an investment related to nuclear, which is another one that, if we think of the concept of energy density, meaning you have sort of a fuel source, and that fuel source has a certain weight to it, and you then say how much energy can I extract from this fuel per unit of weight. This is one of the reasons why when people compare gasoline and aviation fuel to batteries, current batteries, they're getting better, but the energy density of batteries is nowhere near that of gasoline or aviation fuel, and that's why one of the reasons why it makes more sense still to use aviation fuel in planes rather than batteries, because per unit of weight, you're getting a lot more energy. But if you were to say on Earth today, what is the most energy dense thing that we have going for us? It is actually the fuel in nuclear power plants. Nothing else really comes close to that. It has to do with Einstein's E equals mc square and all of that fun physics stuff. But what was notable as we prepared and we continue to prepare our statistics looking across the thematic universe, is it's not just us saying that. It's not just the concept ringing true. there are investors out there that are allocating funds in the direction of nuclear opportunities. I know the price of uranium has done quite well in recent years. And it could be that some investors out there are looking at that and saying, frequently you might have an equity to commodity connection in some of these markets where you have a commodity. Sometimes investors look at that commodity and go in that direction. Sometimes investors see that as signaling a greater and important opportunity, and they want to be involved more with companies that are seeking to profit and to implement that trend. But coming back to Microsoft, you think of what a data center is and what an AI focused data center is. And there were articles just this week talking about Microsoft being connected through OpenAI to a possible 100 billion USD data center investment. I don't know for sure if that is true or if that's just me being baited in to clicking on something. But fascinating nonetheless to think, yes, we're going to need more and more computational power. With that computational power becomes an incredible demand for more energy. And if you think of, again, our most energy dense fuel source on the planet, it is nuclear fuel. And, newer localized modular reactors that help to power data centers that are running all of this AI computational power with the newest NVIDIA chips. This could be something that has an incredible amount of applicability in today's world. Ultimately, the world needs more energy, but we need to go about it in a smart way. And so, why not use any and all fuel sources available to us? Again, taking into account our best abilities of safety and our best sources of knowledge on these topics.
For sure, and modularization is very exciting, and the potential of modularization in nuclear power, going from these giant nuclear power stations that were very difficult to build and very expensive to build, hard to maintain, going into these small modular reactors which are much smaller and can be built in a way that uh, you learn from your from the experience of building one, and then you can start seeing economies of scale, which is precisely what we've seen in the wind and solar industry. Because once you've built one solar module, you basically just need to scale that process up, and in scaling anything up, there are economies of scale, and that's how costs have come down in the last decade for wind and solar so significantly. And perhaps we might start to see a similar trend in nuclear as well, which could be very exciting.
So I know we're getting down to the end of our time together, Mobeen, but I think at this stage it makes sense for each of us to sort of pick a topic as we sort of look forward on the year. We sort of pick and say what might be something interesting that people can watch for as we go from now and getting through the second quarter into the second half of the year. The topic that I'll throw out there, and people might have been seeing discussion of it. And I remember when I was, so Mobeen and I go to airports in Europe a lot. And when I was pulling up about a month ago to all these different airports across Europe, I would see this giant banner of the Samsung S24 phone and two letters. There weren't that many letters on, it was mostly a picture. There weren't that many letters on the banner, but two of the letters that were there were AI. And it was sort of this idea of AI directly in the device. And the logical connection of that is large language models, which get trained in the cloud and frequently run in the cloud, being run not in the cloud, but actually on physical devices. And whether or not this inspires lots and lots and lots of people, hundreds of millions of people, to say, you know what, I need that new device. Now, the X factor here that we haven't yet officially heard is how is Apple going to address AI in the device? In recent weeks, we did see possible connections to Baidu. We saw possible connections to Alphabet and Google. Who knows if those come to fruition or not? It clearly is a signal that Apple understands there's a certain speed element here, there's a certain timing element here. They cannot delay, and so if they have to partner on an AI model for 2024, maybe they go in that direction, or maybe they're holding back a model that they've been working on internally, and they're throwing us off the scent, as they sometimes do with these other statements, potential partnerships with Baidu, Google, and others. But this idea of AI in the device being used to inspire purchasing and a hardware refresh cycle is the idea that I'll leave people with today. And Mobeen, what is the idea that you want to throw out there for something people can look at as we go through the second quarter and into the second half?
I'll say something very similar, the idea of AI in devices, but I'll mention a slightly different device because it belongs to a different industry, and that would be the automotive industry. Chris, I'm a car enthusiast, and it's very exciting for me to see the implementation of generative AI in automobiles. So cars will become one of those devices that will run large language models and give you a more personalized experience. One of the most interesting news items for me in recent days was a new Chinese smartphone manufacturer, Xiaomi, um, uh, delivering its first electric vehicle and making some record sales in its first phase. And it's very exciting to see a smartphone manufacturer enter into the automotive industry, but in a way, it perhaps is a lot more understandable in this new world where cars are becoming connected, cars are practically computers on wheels rather than this thing that gets you from A to B. It feels like you're sitting inside a computer surrounded by screens these days. So it's less surprising that a smartphone manufacturer that is already giving customers that customized experience through its smartphones, it's collecting data from its customers, is now doing the same thing in an automobile where it can give that seamless connection from the smartphone to the car, and the apps are connected, and the data is being collected, and a more personalized chatbot sits inside the car talking to the driver and the passengers and telling you where you can stop for a nice meal based on your tastes and preferences, how to optimize your journey and better plan your holidays and whatnot. So all of this is very exciting because we might see an entire new ecosystem of businesses and enterprise and applications around the car, which we just have not seen in the past. So I would be keen to encourage our audience and indeed investors to keep an eye on the trend in this space.
So I have to thank Mobeen for both participating today and for pronouncing Xiaomi, which I as well had seen headlines of that, and I think the world at large is going to remember that announcement because almost in the same week, Apple was sort of cited as not being able to deliver on the car. And Apple's plans and research and development, it's always a bit secretive. So you never, as an outsider, you're never sure of the full details. But what was clear is they were no longer pursuing the car option. And then Xiaomi, it felt like within days, was putting out their car, which gets them a bit more excitement, a bit of a PR coup, and Mobeen's points are well taken in the sense that all of these different devices are we as consumers are going to expect a customized experience based on what we like and what we want, and we're not going to necessarily be as attuned to just buying something that serves a general purpose. We're going to want customized purpose. We're going to want customized experience, and a cell phone hardware maker has a unique window into a lot of that. Unfortunately, it's a Chinese company. I'm sitting in the U.S., so there is still that U.S. versus China mentality. So I personally in the U.S. don't expect to see Xiaomi cars in the near future. So we'll see how those things go. But from a pure technology perspective, that is a very interesting one. And so with that, again, I thank Mobeen. I thank all of those at Wisdom Tree on our team that help produce these episodes. And I thank our audience for taking part today in the next big thing. We're gonna keep at it. We're gonna keep coming up with new topics and new episodes. Mobeen is gonna continue to be a frequent guest because he and I probably speak the most at Wisdom Tree on these topics. And we will look forward to our next episode in the coming weeks. But with that, everyone, take care. It's been a pleasure.